Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Drew Stevens, and I have been an instructor with Webster for about 14 years, and I wanted to do something a little bit different as you're assessing the new MBA faculty in accordance with the teaching philosophy that you asked for. I'll provide text just below this video, but in addition to the text, I did want to provide this video so you have a rough idea of some of the technology I'm used to and how I particularly operate in the classroom. But before I do that, I wanted to share with you just succinctly a brief background. First and foremost, I have an MBA in global marketing and management. I also happen to have a doctorate in leadership and management with a specific emphasis in workforce productivity and job satisfaction. However, I also have 35 years of business industry experience. I work and have worked as a senior leader with middle market companies, originally in the financial industry, and now an array of different industries, and currently working with them as a turnaround expert in very specific areas, which includes revenue, marketing and sales, and also strategic implementation of those organizations. In addition to that, I have certifications in sales leadership. I have actually established 3 sales leadership programs in major universities around the United States, and I'm actively engaged in obtaining the Series 7 and 66 because of a line of business that I have in terms of financial planning and financial analysis, which has been very helpful with some of the courses that I've been working with Webster to operate in, which is 5650, which is the strategy course, as well as 6200, the capstone course. As I get into teaching philosophy, part of my teaching philosophy is based upon one of my favorite shows of all time as a child growing up. And that particular show was I Love Lucy. And it starred 2 wonderful actors named Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Lucille Ball was a female comedian back in the 50s, and she was absolutely remarkable. And she was married to Desi Arnaz for a number of years, and that's how they started to create the show. Desi was a Cuban-born immigrant, and he was not adjusted to some of the ways that Lucille Ball would operate. And every now and again, he would put his hand on his cheek and he'd say, ay, 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 ay. And what I have done over the years is utilize that acronym as an opportunity for me to embellish a good teaching philosophy at Webster University. First, the I, information. I think information is vital for every student. It's vital for Webster University, and it's vital for the instructor. The students have got to understand what that information is in the form of a syllabus. They have to understand that information in terms of course objectives and assignments, and they actually have to understand how that information is going to help them. And it's up to me to provide that kind of content for them. And so I provide real world examples, and I'll get to that momentarily in terms of information. But more importantly, information to me also means being heavily available to the student. So anytime a student has a question for me in an email form, in today's world, a text message, or even a phone call, I will return all calls within 90 minutes to help clarify any questions or concerns that a student has. At the end of the day, the student is what puts all the lights on at Webster University. And I believe it because I come from a world from Dow Jones many years ago that content is king. And as part and parcel of that, communication is vital to success. Secondly, it's all about interaction. And you will find if you observe me in the classroom that I'm exceedingly interactive with students. There are those that are sitting in a classroom, and I'm sure there are several wonderful professors around. But as I've seen, not only as an institution at Webster, but other universities, there are some instructors that literally come to class, sit behind the desk for 2, 3, 4 hours, and read PowerPoint slides. I truly understand adult learning theory, which is really the fact that students want to be a part of the process. Students want to understand how all of this material is meaningful for them, and they don't want to sit there after having gone through a full day without having been involved in something. So interaction is a big part of that. I believe in a rule of pretty much 60-10-5. What I mean by 60-10-5 is that every 60 minutes, we take a break. Human beings, adults, can only retain so much information for so long. In that 60-minute period, I'm changing different ideologies throughout that time. In other words, the subject material tends to change every 10 minutes, so we're moving on at a pretty decent pace. And every 5 minutes, I'm engaging them in interaction in some way, shape, or form. If I'm live in the classroom, that's a question. If I'm live in the classroom, or if I'm utilizing telecommunication services like WebEx, Zoom, FaceTime, all of these which I'm very accustomed to because I deliver over 300 webinars a year, the ideology is really to keep them engaged, and that's utilizing polling. Having 5-minute student papers, as I call them, where the student provides something, some sort of presentation in 5 minutes. It's asking them to raise hands or engaging with them within the chat session if possible, especially if I'm not dealing with somebody in that time zone, and perhaps we're trying to establish better communication if they're of foreign descent, because I do some international classes as well. More importantly, it's providing statistics, articles, case studies, things that are meaningful, and providing real-world information to them at any particular point in time. As I write this, we're in a global pandemic. And what's interesting is that interaction today is much more important than ever before. And that's because universities are either A, hybrid, or B, completely online. And as part and parcel of that, what needs to happen, especially utilizing services like WebEx, Zoom, or other telecommunication video devices, we need to ensure that people are not playing games, they're not watching television, and they're engaged in the class itself. Which then obviously gets to my third point. And that is, I try to make it informal. I try to get people to relax. I try to ask them questions, get a better understanding of them personally. When I understand what their goals and aspirations are post the program, listening to them as they crave to walk across the stage, and obtain their certificates from the deans of the respective colleges and from the chairs that are there shaking their hands. I want to understand what that feels like, because as I say to them, part of this informality is not to make you a better student, but to make you a better business professional. And that's why they're engaged in the MBA to begin with, which then gets to my fourth principle, and that's engaging. Similar to my earlier comment, my desire is to be interactive with the students as much as possible. Engaging really means to have a presence in the classroom. Engaging to me means to be physically present, but there's some reciprocity here. Part of that engagement is not to be monotone. Part of that is not to be boring. And part of that is to provide real world examples so that the students can sit there and identify and say, I understand what Dr. Stevens is talking about. On the other side of the fence, part of that reciprocity and part of that engagement is making sure that the students are truly engaged in discussion, in the lecture, and in overall material, which truly means that if I'm utilizing telecommunication services, I require that video is on. I want to be able to see the student so that we can engage and make sure that there's interactivity, that they're not busy doing other things. The second thing is that adult learning theory truly has identified the fact that human beings do filter. And by being interactive, I can engage those students a little bit more so that they're gravitating towards the content, and have a better context when we physically leave the classroom. And fifth, and finally, is the fact that it has to be introspective. At the end of the day, I not only want the student to acquire good information, but as I say in all of my classes, whether it's strategy, whether it's management, whether it's marketing, from a general subject area, the content that I'm providing, I'm not about memorization. I'm about comprehension and application. So you need to embellish the information as much as possible. You need to be able to take it in, because at the end of the course, what I want them to do is really think about it, analyze themselves, and how that's going to help them over the course of time. I find that these principles make me a better instructor in the classroom. I find that these principles get me up close and personal with the student and allow me to provide them an education that they've not seen from other instructors before. It is these principles that have allowed me to work at Webster for 14 years and hopefully another 14. It's these principles that have provided me exemplary surveys at the conclusion of these courses. And more importantly, what I also find is because of this III principle from Desi Arnaz, it allows me to maintain relationships with the students for years going forward, because many have come to me about another master's, or they've come to me for perhaps a doctorate. But no matter what, they're engaged in additional learning. And that's what we're here at Webster about. We're here to provide education. We're here to provide a network so that students are free to come back and gain additional education wherever, whenever, and however they desire. I want to thank you for listening to this. What you didn't get here, you'll get in my commentary through text. Have a blessed day, and thank you for the opportunity.